Hello everyone, I just want to give a quick announcement. Our video might have some audio issues, such as popping and intense breathing. This is because we don't have great mics, we use our gamer headsets. Also, I want to give a quick shout out to my guy, Uwu Baconly. Without him, this video would not be possible. Let's dig straight into the video. Hello everyone. Welcome back to the Anime Chat's official podcast, episode 2. Today, I have invited two special guests, Tyykko and FireFullBore, to have a serious discussion about Darling in the Franxx.
Yo, what's up? Tyykko here.
Howdy, FireFullBore here. Pleasure to be here.
Alright, well let's start talking about Darling in the Franxx. So, I didn't actually watch the anime. For me, I read the manga about Darling in the Franxx. So I'm curious to see what kind of differences there is between the anime and the manga before we really start delving into the serious part of this discussion.
Well, when you got Trigger, right? Trigger anime, Trigger experience, mixed together with A1 Pictures and Cloverworks, and then you throw in basically Evangelion. You have this cluster mess of an anime.
Right.
I can't really disagree. It's an interesting experiment. Like it's one of those things where obviously the intention wasn't necessarily a good story or any meaningful philosophy. Then they tried to make it that, and then they gave up and then went just full insane. Not in a good way. Not in a good way either.
I'm curious, do you think that the story is necessary for the plot of Darling in the Franxx if you think that the whole show is just a metaphor for reproduction?
You know, let me just break it down and say it like this. The whole reason the plot is there is to bring purpose for the character's existence. Because
Okay.
honestly, if you remove the plot, you basically have a bunch of mindless teenagers, right? Trying to be philosophical, trying to reach this end to a means that's not really answered. I guess. I don't.
They're trying to find their way throughout the universe. Is that what you're kind of saying? Because
Well, the whole thing of the show is that it doesn't really, it, at least the first half, like, it tries so much to like tie in the relationship between like Hira, the main character, and Zero too.
okay.
And towards the center, right, we get this whole plot dump, this background story, what happens with 02 and Hero. And then the whole second half is just, I feel like I'm watching the end of Evangelion movie. Like it just goes full on berserk. Like I feel like I just got injected with like dramatization trippy drugs. I don't know what's happening. I just, you can't really answer that question about plot because the plot kind of made up as the story goes.
So
Or at
it's
least it seems like that. At least it seems like that.
so
Yeah.
you're saying that it's more of an excuse for the relationship between 02 and Hero.
Yeah, it's the plot. I mean, I didn't write the story to this. I wasn't the one, penning this as the producer, the original writer was, but at least in my mind as a viewer, the plot kind of is explained as it goes, and it's not really, it doesn't seem natural. I guess that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, I mean, first, I think it's incorrect that really there is no initial metaphor. Like, I know how you brought up like the idea of reproduction. I don't even think that's really in this, because I think there's, coming from some guy who casually watches this kind of stuff, there's always been a stigmatism, maybe, or maybe even just an attribute of this whole genre of over-sexualization. This show tries to embrace that, while also, like, especially the first half, I would argue, is this whole focus on becoming an adult. Like, you have to remember the plot. Basically, you have this group of teenagers, right, and they basically are trained by these adults. They're overlords, is the way they separate the two, to do all this fighting for them. And so at least the initial plot is about growing up and understanding what is being an adult, divorced from what an adult actually is. Which you could argue plays into the whole like reproduction thing. That's what they try to do. Now, I'm not saying that's actually what ended up happening, because especially after, as Tyykko said, after halfway through the show, it just went from trying to do something to complete Bologna sandwich at this point. I mean, especially the ending. It's basically like the Evangelion movie. I totally agree. It's basically the Evangelion movie ending, except with that, you could at least attempt to draw some kind of like philosophical discussion out of that. This one, there was nothing. There was nothing to grab onto. You were just blasted with ice cold water, threw in a fire, buried in dirt, and then told to have a bubble tea smoothie or something like that. I don't know.
Well, I'm curious. What's actually what's talk about the ending of Darling in the Franxx, because since I read the manga, the ending when I decided to watch the last episode, right? Because I wanted to see what was different. A lot of people said the ending was really weird. It was completely different from what I read. There was no child between the blonde-haired guy and the girl and the dude. There was none of that. Okay, I don't even know where they were fighting. Like they were fighting in space or something. And then how the manga ended was it was right after the battle between Zero Two and the Craxosaur Queen. This ended like I don't even know.
Well,
It ended happily. In the manga, ended more like with a philosophical ending. It definitely was completely different from what I was
well,
reading.
the thing is, at least in the anime, is that we get all these other useless sub stories, like subplots, that they
Yeah.
try to bring a conclusion to. Like for example, the blonde girl, right, Kokoro, and then we have Mitsuru, the dude. The whole subplot of them basically learning how to reproduce. They had to at least answer to that ending, like.
But here's the thing: in the manga, it was nothing like that. She found the book, right? And she reads the book and she's all curious about it. And you can tell that there's like a friendly relationship between the two, but there was by no means they did not have a child and they did not, you know, do the deed. Um, so I think definitely I think Trigger took some freedom in making this anime, and I don't know if the freedom that they took was actually the right kind of freedom, because in the end I think it made the show probably a lot worse than um, from what I was reading.
Yeah, I think freedom, or the idea they took a little too much freedom with it, I think is a fair point. Yeah, I think they went too far.
I think in a sense this brings up the discussion of, is it okay for a studio to take a source material or to take source material and to derive something out of their own interpretation out of it? Like, is it okay to take originally intended and make changes to it to quote unquote more better suit your audience or your medium?
You know, I think anime studios shouldn't change an author's original work. Now works like Cowboy Bebop, I think that's totally fine because that um didn't have any manga or light novels or whatever. It was made as an original production. However, I think changing in this case, Darling in the Franxx to what you wanted it to be, and changing the story to where it just gets a lot more confusing than I really think that's wrong, and that you shouldn't change an author's original work unless they give you the permission to do so.
I guess it's also dependent on how much of a change it is. Like, I have not read the manga for Darling in the Franxx, but it seems like what they did change didn't like severely overall change it, I guess. Like, it's still, the ending is not amazing. Like, the overall story and the plot in general is not amazing, but
Well, they
I
definitely. I mean, yeah, there's some minor things that were changed, like having the baby, and then the ending was just complete whack, man. Like, so I think Trigger in this case definitely. I think if they stuck to the original work, the ending would have been so much more better and not as confusing, if you know what I'm saying. What do you think about this FireFullBore?
I mean, personally, I have no problem with. I guess we need to be careful with the term adaptation, but personally, I'm fine with them modifying it so it plays better for the medium that's being produced. Remember, anime is generally a TV show or a movie, so it makes more sense if you need to make changes in order to make it flow better, instead of some of the implied things that you see when you're reading something in comparison. Then an adaptation is totally justified. But I think arguably, had they stuck with the original script, which once again I haven't read the manga either, I've only watched the anime. I think personally it could have been better. Now that being said, I think, and this is only because I've watched the anime, I haven't read the manga, so I can't compare it. But at least especially the past relationship with the main characters Hero and 02, especially that whole flashback sequence, was honestly probably the key highlight of the whole show. It was the reason I thought the show was going to be good. Because when I was watching it, it was like, okay, this is kind of mediocre. But when we got to that part, I was like, okay, so there's this significant, more important undertow that we don't realize. Not just about the adults, who are the overseers, if you will, of all the kids here. But also there's an important relationship between 02 as well as 02's background, and plus Hero and how they relate to each other. And then which I don't know if that was in the original manga.
It was.
Yeah, so like if at least in that particular episode, I think it was episode 15, remember correctly. When it got to that, I thought for a moment, especially during that episode, that maybe this is the most important part of the whole show. Was how the greatest enemy maybe wasn't the Klaxosaurs, but maybe is the Overseers, if you will.
Right.
But, which I don't know if that was the main point of the manga, but I felt like that was kind of an implied subplot, major consideration for the whole show. But as you know, after that episode, they just threw everything in the garbage.
Focusing on what you said about, if the overseers were the bad guys or not, it's kind of unclear which side is really wrong. Because the overseers seem like they're good, but you kind of see their dark side. And then you have the Kraxosaurs who want to, destroy humanity because, I don't know, they love Earth or something, right? And then we have our cast, which is caught right in the middle. It's almost up to the watcher and reader to decide, hey, who is, our antagonist here?
Well, I think though there's still a bias in the story.
Right. Well, it's more against the Kraxosaurs, of course. But really,
I would actually argue differently, at least in the anime, when they introduced the Kraxosaur blue princess person.
Mm-hmm.
At least for me, the show definitely leaned more towards the Kraxosaurs being the just ones. Not
well,
saying that really
it was
affects
more or
anything
less
about the anime, but
more or less they were trying to do it for revenge, right? Because
yeah,
the doctor guy, didn't he cut off the queen's arm or something? I'm pretty sure.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's been a bit for me, but I can definitely see what you're saying, and that's why I personally think it's up for the consumer to decide who is the main enemy in the series. It's totally up to your own opinions at this point.
But that being said, I don't think the anime, and maybe even the manga, don't really give you a reason to have that discussion on who's the real bad guy.
Because I don't think that wasn't the focus, right? Because the focus was, in my opinion, was the whole metaphor part and the relationship between Hero and 02. The focus wasn't really on who's right and who's wrong.
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't think it was really about a metaphor of reproduction, because that implies some philosophical discussion on that front. I believe it was just an excuse to have as many references to illicit or inappropriate conduct between male and female individuals. I think that was the main excuse.
Or,
I mean,
maybe
mean,
that
it's
they were
all-
just inserting that fan service in there because, that keeps everybody watching,
I mean, as I said, being a casual anime watcher, one of the main stigmatisms that prevented me from getting to the genre originally was this idea that everything was just over-sexualized because that's what everyone wanted.
Right.
Which, unfortunately for Darling in the Franxx, kind of fit that bill, just slightly differently in some ways.
I mean, you should have been careful if you didn't see that etchy tag,
Yeah, well, you see,
There
you
is
have to
no
remember,
issue
I
tag.
was a casual, and still am a casual watcher. So at the time I was watching it, I didn't know what most of that stuff meant.
Mm, I
So
see.
the main thing I saw was action. I read the little blurb, and of course, you have to be careful with a little blurb or summary of like what the point of the show is, or like why you should watch the show, basically. Because at least I read that, I was like, okay, this looks interesting. That's why I originally started watching it. But you've probably seen enough shows where what they say it's about and then what it actually turns out to be are completely different.
I got you. Yeah, that is really something to think about right here. What do you think about this, Tycho?
I don't really know what to say. I mean, you always have to take a risk when going into things.
It's
you
true.
know?
You can't just let a summary hold you back, but also, you have to be careful on choosing.
Like, as a show, right? As this came out what 2018? I would say what really got people to even watch this had to be 02 Waifu. Right? Honestly,
You know
I
what?
remember at least on Reddit, like r/anime 0 Tuesdays. Like that was super big. That kind of brought people in. People were genuinely curious because of the memes and the kind of internet sensation it was.
I'll be completely honest, is that I read Darling in the Franxx because of the memes and because of Zero Two. Because I saw Zero Two everywhere. It's like, a lot of people are talking about the Zero Two. I'm kind of curious to learn more, and that's kind of what got me uh into Darling in the Franxx in the first place.
For me, it was just because I was browsing through a streaming website and just like, oh, I want to watch some like action thing. I was kind of in this action mecha phase at the time, so I think I just finished watching one of the Mobile Suit Gundams. So just give a little bit of context of where I was at the time. I saw that, I'm like, okay, it's action, it's mecha, looks kind of interesting. So I started watching it. I mean, it became very clear as soon as I saw the mech designs that something was a little off. I wish I realized it sooner, but
But
Boy,
by
was it a
then,
great surprise.
yeah,
I mean, look. I'll be honest. Darling in the Franxx, like, it's 2020 now, right? Darling in the Franxx is not where it was 2 years ago. It's not as talked about as it was 2 years ago. But I do feel like, at least for people who've seen it, the show itself, I would say, has influenced the way people, at least look at the mecha anime genre, like Evangelion, right? It's not a pure war-focused mecha anime like Gundam is, but it tries to reach into other genres, tries to reach into other, different. It tries to reach a wider audience compared to
I
more
think it's a
niche
common
stuff.
theme for mechas now. A lot of modern mechas that aren't from that era are trying to basically use mecha, or they're trying to reintroduce mecha through combining other genres to get other people's attention with it.
Yeah,
That's
I
my
mean,
personal take on it.
I completely agree. I mean, like looking at Gainax as a studio with Fooly Cooly and Gurren Lagann, those quote unquote mecha animes, right, are not really, I would classify as a true mecha, but more so reaches into other genres. So yeah, for sure.
you guys bring up really valid points that I didn't really consider until now.
Yeah, you're welcome, I guess. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like, I'm
like,
kind
what
of
am I
out of
supposed
it,
to say to that?
bro. I don't know, man. Uh,
I mean, that's why we're having these discussions, right?
yeah,
Expand your horizons. Think a little bit deeper about, I suppose, what's most important in life for some
sure,
people.
Yeah, like Darling in the Franxx is important in life. You
dude.
know what I mean?
I
Like,
was
I need a
gonna
little bit of
say,
0-2 body pillows in
bro,
my life.
I was gonna say like that this was a must-watch title, but I'm like, I can't say that because I didn't watch it, and now
Well,
I'm thinking about it, like this is not must-watch. I think there's a point where you know you should consider watching it.
well, I think as like I would say that there are certain shows that come around that I feel like people should at least give a try. I think Darling in the Franxx, at least at one point, was one of those shows, especially when it first came out in 2018. I wouldn't compare it to shows like, oh, at least everyone's got to see Sword Art Online, at least everyone's got to watch Naruto. I wouldn't classify it as that. I would say it's more of a more underneath that tier. Like if you have at least watched, like the like quote unquote starter anime, I guess definitely branching into at least checking out Darling or Franxx. It's not a must, but you should probably at least have this in your watch library at some point.
You know, just to give it a shot.
Yeah, and it's not even like because you have to watch it because everyone else is watching. I think it's important to watch anime that you would enjoy, but I do think it's important to at least reach out and understand why certain people enjoy certain anime. Like that was me in Evangelion. Like, Evangelion, in my opinion, interesting. I liked it when I watched it the first time, but now thinking back, like it's definitely not really like my type of anime. But I think it's important that I checked it out in the first place because it's pretty big in the anime community. So
All right. Well, I think this draws our podcast to a close. Thank you for joining us on episode 2 of our official Anime Chads podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe. We'd like to know what you think in the comments down below.
Been a pleasure to have us. Thank you.
yeah, and hope to see you guys later on the channel.